My husband thought I was asleep until I overheard a shocking secret that changed everything. I will never forget the day when the walls of my perfect little world crumbled down. There I was, cocooned in the warmth of my blankets, pretending to be lost in dreamland. But my heart raced, and my ears perked up. The way the house had grown so silent sent chills down my spine. Then I heard a faint but unmistakable sound of his voice, low and urgent. "Just come over, shall never know." My blood ran cold. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the darkness to pull me further into nothingness, but curiosity held me captive. What was happening? My husband, loving and devoted, was plotting something in my own home. I cracked one eye, peeking through the sliver of light spilling from beneath the bedroom door. I could see his silhouette, a towering figure, yet suddenly so small. My heart thudded against my ribs, each beat a reminder of the trust we built together. This wasn't the first time I'd sensed something amiss. There had been whispers, fleeting moments, when I caught him staring out the window, brow furrowed. Late nights that turned into early mornings while he was working late. I brushed those thoughts aside, attributing them to my imagination. Love sometimes dulls our instincts, doesn't it? The voices grew louder, my breath caught in my throat. "You will ruin everything." A woman's voice, smooth and inviting. My skin prickled. Who was she? What did she mean by everything? My stomach churned, twisting with dread. I mentally kicked myself for not paying closer attention. I thought I knew every part of him, the man who brushed my hair behind my ear as we laughed, who hugged me until I felt safe. But now I was left with questions scratching against my chest. Suddenly, a distant laughter echoed, sharp and foreign. A scraping sound, furniture moving. My heart hammered. Had he brought someone here? Did they even know I was just a breath away, hanging on every word? A lump formed in my throat, tears pricking at my lashes. I fought against the torrent of emotion, desperate to hold on to hope that this was nothing. But hope can be fragile. Time seemed to stop. The world outside faded, yet my heartbeat pounded like a drum. I felt trapped, clinging to the edge of a cliff, straddling the line between love and betrayal. Just then, the door creaked open slightly, and shadows danced in the dim light. I held my breath, terror coursing through me. "Just tell me what you found out." The urgency in his voice sliced through my uncertainty. I dared not move. In that moment, reality warped. I was poised on the brink of the unknown, trembling with fear but also fueled with fury. What on earth was happening? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The silence that followed his whispered urgency felt suffocating, as if the very air around me had thickened into a dense fog of betrayal. I leaned in closer, though my instincts screamed at me to pull away, to avoid what I might uncover. In that moment, the vulnerable girl wrapped in blankets disappeared, replaced by a woman desperate for answers. Who is she? What could possibly be so important that he would risk everything for a conversation behind closed doors? The door creaked open slightly more, just enough for a sliver of light to spill into the darkness of our bedroom. I darted my gaze around the room, seeking anything that could ease the earthquake shaking my heart. I turned my attention back to the silhouettes flickering just beyond the threshold, and I could make out two figures now, his broad shoulders hunched close to a form that was smaller, slighter, and vibrating with energy. "Do you really think she suspects?" the woman asked, her voice laced with a honeyed sweetness that made my skin crawl. "You said she never pays attention." This whole thing will blow over, and we can go back to how it was. A wave of nausea pushed up from my belly. Everything felt so surreal and possibly twisted. Was it all an actress's performance, a charade that existed just for the thrill of it? Or had my husband truly anchored his intentions to someone else's heart? Through the thin wall that separated me from a truth that would change everything, I strained to hear more. Not if we're careful. His voice sounded tainted with sincerity. But was it fear? Regret? In telling you, this can't last forever. It's not just you. I have a life I can't just throw away, not yet. Yet? My mind reeled at that single word. It felt like a knife twisted deep as I pondered what yet could mean. He wasn't talking about a mere fling. This was far more complicated. The foundations of our love were cracking under the weight of secrets. Somewhere in that fleeting moment of turmoil, amidst despair, a flicker of kindness appeared. My hand fell to my side tably, a small, wooden box gifted from him for my birthday. Inside lay letters we had exchanged, a testament of the love we built together, vulnerable confessions, and soft-spoken hopes for a future. If he could betray me, could I do the same? As hope began to seep back into my heart, a flicker of purpose ignited. Just as I turned to gain some semblance of control, the shadows at the door began to ebb. The woman's voice mingled with my rising panic now, their conversation quickening as I sensed they were about to leave. Time was slipping away, a precious currency I desperately needed to hold onto. "Wait!" My husband's voice surged back into prominence. "He'll be right back. Just keep an eye out." In that moment, I wanted to scream, to barge into the hallway and demand transparency, to tear down the illusions we had built and face the truth bare. But fear, like a heavy curtain, silenced me. "Fine, but I can't sit around waiting forever." The woman's voice was tinged with impatience. I calmed my breath, keeping it shallow despite the storm raging inside me, and braced myself for the possibility of a confrontation. Just then, a soft knock echoed against the wood of our front door, barely audible over my heart's rapid rhythm. I gasped softly, heart catching in my throat as I instinctively ducked deeper into the shadows of our dimly lit room. The door swung open slightly, revealing a splash of unexpected warmth in the form of a neighbor, Clara. Her usual sunny demeanor was clouded with concern. "Hey, I saw your lights on and wanted to check in," she said hesitantly, her eyes scanning the corridor. The sudden shift created a peculiar twist in my chest, a momentary window of hope. Clara always knew when something was wrong. Perhaps she could provide clarity amid the chaos swirling around me. I opened my mouth to respond, to call out to her, but the impending confrontation dulled my instincts, silencing the words just as they formed. "Is everything okay?" Clara asked, tilting her head, misinterpreting my silence as something more profound than mere shock. I whispered, forcing the breath from my lungs. I didn't know how to unravel this knot, didn't know how to frame a question that might unveil the monster hiding within my walls. Just then, my husband's voice broke through, sharper and commanding, instantly shifting the atmosphere. "What are you doing here?" I pressed my back against the wall, heart thumping like a war drum, and prepared to face the storm. The air trembled with an unspoken truth, and a weight bore down on my shoulders, the realization that the secrets I had suspected were no longer whispers, but roars ready to shatter everything I held dear. But before I could summon the courage to respond or reveal the reality that hovered just beyond the weight of uncertainty, the door creaked wider. I realized too late that I was not the one with the power to control this narrative. I had merely become a ghost in my own life, poised to witness a world unravel, but ready to grasp the glimmers of truth in the darkest hour. And just as the door swung open completely, the shattering revelation I both craved and dreaded came tumbling out like an avalanche. A woman stepped forward, her face betraying a familiarity that knocked the breath from me. "Surprise, darling," she cooed with a sinister smile. "I hope you're ready for some revelations." In the agonizing silence that followed her intrusive greeting, a cacophony of emotions crashed over me like waves in a tempest rage. Betrayal, fear, all crashing together in a violent storm that threatened to tear apart the flimsy foundations of my reality. I felt the heat flooding into my cheeks, battling against an overwhelming chill that coiled tightly around my heart. How was I supposed to react? Did this woman really think she held dominion over my life, flaunting her presence like a trophy while I stood frozen in disbelief? My husband's silhouette loomed in the doorway, a once familiar figure now cloaked in shadows of deceit. The flicker of light that caught his eyes intense, anxious only deepened the creases forming between his brows. It was as if a delicate thread had snapped, and in turn, my heart began to dismantle itself, piece by agonizing piece. "What is she doing here?" I managed to ask, my voice steadier than I felt. It was remarkable how urgency could forge resolve from the ashes of despair. "What's going on?" The woman, this intruder, stepped fully into the light, revealing a face I recognized all too well. My breath caught in my throat. Glancing between them, I sensed her confidence, her malice, like a predator poised to savor the hunt, and it ignited something deep within me, a flicker of defiance. "Oh, sweetie, we were just getting to know each other," she purred, clearly enjoying my discomfort, twisting the knife inside me for sport. "Your husband has been so busy lately." She leaned casually against the wall, as if we were merely having a cup of tea instead of standing on the precipice of ruin. "Busy?" I repeated, tasting the word like poison. "Busy keeping secrets from me?" My pulse quickened, each beat punctuating my demand for an honest answer. "Honesty is a relative term, isn't it?" she threw back, and I flinched at her sweetness turned bitter. "Besides, it's been good for both of us." "You've been rather preoccupied, haven't you?" The implication hung heavy in the air, suffocating my ability to breathe. It clashed with a vague sense of guilt buried beneath the layers of anger rising to the surface. Sure, I'd been lost in my own world, focusing on my drawings and escaping into the comforting embrace of creativity. My art had crept into the darkness, trading emotional depth for the numbness that accompanied reality. "Julie," my husband interjected softly, attempting to placate, though the tremor in his voice contradicted his assurance. "This isn't not now," I hissed, cutting him off. "Take your apology, and leave it at the threshold where you stand." I turned my full attention back to the woman, my heart racing. "Tell me what this all means." "Only that I'm a part of your husband's life now," she declared, relishing in the horror reflected in my eyes. "He talks about you so confused, so distant. You're pulling away. And he deserves more than that." A whisper of doubt snaked its way into my consciousness. How could she know? How could she see what I had kept hidden from myself? "Who are you to tell me what he deserves?" I challenged, every syllable tasting like gravel. "But we've found a connection in his loneliness," she said, shrugging casually, her demeanor utterly maddening. "The fire's still there. It's just misplaced. It's not your fault. It's just how it is." Each word dripped like venom, and yet I felt that slight twist in my chest. Somehow, it felt true. I looked at my husband, his gaze cast downward in shame, like a man trapped in the web spun by someone else's design. "Julie, please," he urged. "I can explain. I never meant for this to happen." "It's a mistake." "A mistake?" I scoffed. "This is no mistake. There are choices being made, promises broken. Can you really call them promises if you've chosen not to hear them?" she countered, a smug smile curling at her lips. "You've isolated yourself, painting pictures instead of getting involved, neglecting the very bond that once tied you close. In that instant, her words struck a nerve. Her manipulation was cruel, yet the cruelest truth lay in the depths of her monologue. Had I turned a blind eye, surrendering our connection for moments of solitary peace? My heart twisted painfully, caught between guilt and betrayal. My thoughts spiraled, brewing into a storm of confusion. Was Clara's gentle knock my saving grace, or the catalyst I needed to awaken? Enough! I shouted, fighting against the dizzying tide. You are trespassing into something sacred. This is my home. But my declaration came stumbling out, a half-hearted shield against the destruction spiraling around me. Anger raged like fire in my chest, but there was something else I couldn't ignore, a flicker of fear that if I began to uncover emotions buried beneath layers of numbness, I'd only end up lost in an endless chasm of confusion. As I steadied my breath, preparing for what felt like the inevitable earthquake of revelation ahead, I glanced to my husband. But before his eyes could communicate anything of plea or explanation, the door swung open wider, revealing Clara, a look of horror on her face as she stood first-hand witness to this web of chaos. Julie, she breathed, desperate concern washing over her features. What's going on? I heard yelling, and as her presence flooded the room, the balance shifted in a triangle of emotions now enclosing us all in this fragile space of unknowns. I was teetering on the edge. I could embrace this connection with Clara, or I could try to understand the man responsible for the storm, the man I had once cherished and trusted. But in that exhale of emotion, the flicker of warmth, I had clung to dim threateningly. The truth of the matter was clear. Revelations were just beginning to emerge from the shadows, and what they held might sever the last thread tethering me to him. As Clara stepped into the room, her eyes darted between the three of us, me husband, the intruder, and me. Her features contorted as though she were witnessing a horrific car crash, unable to look away yet powerless to intervene. The air crackled with tension, heavy with the weight of unspoken truths and hidden resentments. Julie? She whispered again, but her voice was stronger now, a lifeline in the tumultuous chaos. What's happening? Feeling the desperation clawing at my insides, I opened my mouth to explain, but a storm of emotion swallowed my words whole. Instead, I clenched my fists, focusing my gaze on the woman who had so casually disrupted my life. With each breath, my resolve built, fueling the fire that coursed through me. This woman says she and my husband are involved, I finally managed, my voice steady though my heart raced. And it seems they've conspired to eliminate me from his life bit by bit. Clara gasped, her face morphing from concern to disbelief. What? No, that can't be true, she replied, instinctively stepping closer to me, a protective instinct rising within her. But the intruder only laughed, her mockery a harsh dagger that cut deep. Oh, come on, Clara, she smirked, you know how it is. People are never as innocent as they appear, especially when art becomes a form of escapism. Don't you see? Julie has been avoiding her own reality so diligently that she no longer even recognizes its crumbling around her. Clara's brows furrowed in confusion. What do you mean? She grasped my forearm, sending a ripple of comfort and support through me as I struggled to stay grounded. Art's great and all, I replied, seeking Clara's eyes for strength, but I shouldn't have clung to it more than the person I shared my life with. My heart pounded painfully, the truth trembling just beneath the surface. I lost myself in my work, while he found someone else. Clara tightened her grip. You know that's not true, right? You're an amazing artist, but that doesn't mean you're neglecting your family. There's more to it than just that. You're not the villain here, Julie. The intruder flicked her hair back, apparently unbothered by the movement towards solidarity between Clara and me. See? This is typical, she said, feigning sympathy as her eyes blazed with satisfaction. Make her think she deserves the blame while standing in a perfect little bubble of self-righteousness. How noble! Enough! I cried out, desperation clawing at my throat. You talk as if this were a game to you, but it's not. You can't just waltz into my life and take what belongs to me. Not my husband. Not our memories. Whenever we exchanged our dreams, it was supposed to be for us. I didn't take anything, she insisted, her voice dripping with sweet poison. He came to me willingly. Maybe it's time you asked yourself why. The weight of her words pressed heavy on my chest, the chilling truth lurking just beyond my grasp. How had I let it come to this? A part of me wanted to ignore it all, to flee back into the sanctuary of my art where colors blurred the lines of pain. But another part, perhaps the bruised but defiant heart screaming for clarity within me, demanded that I stand my ground. "Julie, this isn't the end of your story," Clara urged, squeezing my arm tighter. "We can face this together. I'm here." Hearing Clara's words sent a flicker of warmth through my frozen heart, yet uncertainty loomed above us all like a storm cloud threatening a downpour. As I tried to reconcile my emotions, I felt lost within the chaos, straddling the line between lingering love for the man I had once adored and the overwhelming betrayal consuming me. "Tell me," I said, forcing my eyes back onto my husband, desperately searching for any semblance of honesty buried within his guilt-ridden demeanor. "Is this your choice? Is that what you want?" He opened his mouth, but no words spilled forth, only silence thickened by trepidation. My heart raced as every second stretched like an eternity. Then, unexpectedly, he caught my gaze, something flickering in his intense eyes, an emotion I couldn't quite place. Was it fear? Regret? Longing? Then, just as the air thrummed with an unbearable tensile, a sudden sound echoed from the hall. A child's laughter. My heart stuttered, recognition blooming in my chest like a dark omen. It was Eliana, our daughter, her sweet voice filling the void, blissfully unaware of the storm raging within the walls of her home. Before I could even comprehend what that laughter meant, before I could process the ramifications of its interrupting presence, the door to the room cracked open wider. I turned, heart sinking as Eliana peeked around the corner, her innocent eyes alight with delight, oblivious to the unholy gathering occurring just beyond. "Mommy, are you okay?" she asked, and her little face cut through the heavy tension like a ray of sunlight piercing dark clouds. Time seemed to stand still as my breath caught in my throat, mingling hope and dread, one precious heartbeat standing between the warmth of her familiarity and the bitter truth I now faced. I rushed forward, my heart aching, unsure if I would embrace her joy or the devastation at the heart of my life. "Maybe I should have just let this charade go on," the intruder murmured, a wicked gleam reflecting in her eyes. "After all, the real show has hardly begun." The laughter echoed through the hallway, a sweet innocence that momentarily severed the tension in the room. I could hardly move, frozen between the reality I had crafted for Eliana and the chaotic truth unraveling in front of me. My heart pulsed with conflicting emotions, love for my daughter battling against the anguish that threatened to consume me. "Mommy?" Eliana's curious face peeked further into the room, confusion painting her features as she clasped her tiny hands in front of her, still dressed in her princess pajamas. I wanted to reach out to her, to gather her in my arms, and shield her from the storm brewing so close, but I stood paralyzed, grappling with a decision I had never envisioned making. "Sweetheart," I managed, my voice trembling as I forced a smile that felt like a mask. I'm okay. Just some adult talk, you know? "What kind of talk?" Her head tilted, earnestness shining through her wide eyes, and the softness in her voice plucked at the strings of my heart as I wrestled with the shadows looming behind me. "Just grown-up stuff," I stammered, my gaze darting back to my husband. He rubbed his neck nervously, his expression a tempest of emotions that mirrored my own turmoil. I needed to protect her, but I also couldn't shelter her from the darkness that might shape her understanding of love forever. The intruder crossed her arms and stepped forward, betraying a smirk that reeked of satisfaction. "Oh, come on, let's not lie to the little angel. Sometimes adults get tangled in nasty situations." Her taunt cut through the fragile connection I wanted to foster with Eliana, and I felt the heavy pressure of tears threatening to spill. "Stay away from her," I snapped, the ferocity surprising even me, the weight of maternal instinct surging through me, a primal urge to defend my child at all costs. Honey, why don't you go back to your toys? My husband attempted to intervene, his voice shaky. We're just discussing my job. It's very boring. Eliana's innocence shone like a beacon in the night, but I knew I couldn't let her go. Not yet. My connection with her had always been a refuge, an anchoring place where I could forget my troubles. But now I felt my worlds colliding with catastrophic impact. Is it about Miss? She squinted, trying to recall the name of the intruder, her naive confusion almost maddening against the backdrop of the chaos swirling in the room. Mommy, can I stay? She insisted, stepping closer with a slight pout, clearly deciphering that something was amiss. In that moment, the truth lay suspended in the air. I should have shielded her from the reality of hurt and betrayal, should have created a world where princesses always dominated, and castles stood strong against any storm. Yet, standing here reddened, weak, how could I protect her from the shards of my happiness? As if sensing my turmoil, Clara stepped forward, becoming a fortress between us and the intruder. Eliana, how about we go paint together? You love painting. Clara's voice was smooth, calming, a balm against the wound we were all trying to process. Can I use the sparkly blue? Eliana's eyes sparkled with a child's wonder as Clara nodded, urging her back into the world of innocence, a world where things hadn't shattered yet. Just as I felt a flicker of relief, the intruder stepped forward, her face a mask of faux sweetness. But I'd love to hear more about this beautiful family, she crooned, turning her attention away from me and toward Eliana. Especially since it seems like Mommy has been a bit too distracted lately. My heart dropped. How could she spin words to paint me as the bad guy to my own child? I could feel a swell of guilt rising in my chest, desperately pushing down the associations with failure that tugged at me. What had I been doing all this time? Had I been so lost in my art that I had neglected the most important parts of my life? Mommy, are you okay? Eliana's voice pierced through, innocent yet heavy with the weight of my silence. I'm learning, I stammered, gripping the edge of the table, seeking the strength I knew resided deep within me. Learning about what matters most. The intruder threw her head back, laughter brimming over in a disingenuous gale. You see, darling? You'll need to learn quickly if you plan to hold on to what's left. Every word dripped with venom, and despite my desperation to shield Eliana from the truth, the bitterness of her comment hung under the weight of reality we both now faced. Mommy. Eliana's desperate insistence brought me back to focus. I want to make a painting of us, all three of us. Can we do that? Gulping hard, I felt as though my heart was wrenched in conflicting directions. I wanted to say yes, to nurture the sweetness of her innocence. But darkness lingered, threatening to swallow everything whole. A moment of sobering clarity hit me as was the ripple of a fractured family starting its tremors, and I was standing at its epicenter, torn between love and self-preservation. That moment, a phone buzzed loudly from the kitchen, startling me, as if it were a long-forgotten ghost demanding attention. My husband glanced toward the sound, his eyes flickering with trepidation, and my heart jumped in anticipation as I recognized the message alert. Who is it? My voice came out sharper than intended, but inside I was rattled, sensing more dread and darkness. He hesitated, and for a painful breath, our lives hung in a delicate balance, reality teetering on the edge of creeping dread. Then, he turned to me, guilt flooding his expression. It's Mia, he whispered, and something twisted within me at the mention of the name, the echo of betrayal reflecting back so heavily it felt like a punch to the gut. Mia. The one I had unknowingly competed with for not just my husband's heart, but also my children's happiness. Each syllable was a reminder that this storm was far from over. Answer it, I said, my heart racing. Eliana looked between us, sensing the charged air, and I could almost hear her small heart breaking alongside mine. This was the moment everything morphed from fragile hope to an emotional abyss. The stakes were rising higher than ever, building to a tense crescendo, as our lives threatened to fracture irreparably. What other truths lay buried beneath the surface, waiting to be unearthed? The decisions made in this flicker of time could reshape everything, and I had no idea what awaited us if we ventured deeper into this tangled mess of betrayal. The intruder leaned back, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. The game was far from over, and the stakes were only growing higher. With a quiet desperation clawing at my insides, I turned away from the tableau unfolding in front of me. The air was thick with unspoken words, grudges waiting to burst, and I could feel the tightrope stretching beneath me as I fought to maintain my balance. I wanted to scream, to tell the world to stop turning while I caught my breath. Instead, I clenched my fists and faced the blinding chaos head-on. "Answer it," I repeated, my voice barely more than a harsh whisper. I could feel Eliana's small form shifting next to me, her brows drawn with concern. I didn't want her to see me like this, breaking apart at the seams, but I couldn't allow my husband to avoid the truth any longer. He hesitated again, but only for a fleeting second before crossing the threshold into the kitchen to take the call, leaving me tangled in my anxiety. I watched his back retreat into the dimness, my heart pounding wildly, as though it understood the unpredictable nature of the storm unfurling just out of sight. Eliana, meanwhile, toyed with her princess pajamas, a slight frown knitting her delicate brow as she sensed the change around us. I knelt down beside her, forcing a smile that felt increasingly foreign on my face. "Princess," I said, my voice softer, willing it to envelop her in warmth. "Why don't we paint that picture you wanted of us? Just the two of us?" Her eyes lit up, momentarily dispelling the heaviness clinging to the air. "Okay, but you have to promise not to use too much green. Remember last time?" Her chuckle filled the room and danced around my throat, tightening around the shards of anxiety threatening to break me. "I promise," I replied, a laugh escaping despite the fear pressurized in my chest. I took her tiny hand in mine, leading her toward the living room, where our art supplies shone brightly, a realm of possibility. But even as I gathered the paints, the phone call in the kitchen rang like a siren song, dangerous and alluring, promising revelations that could unravel everything I was grasping to hold together. I set up the canvas, wielding a brush as if it could mask the churning turmoil inside of me. Each stroke guided my thoughts back to Eliana's radiant smile, her unwavering faith in me to create magic from chaos. But I couldn't escape the ebbing dread that clawed at my mind every time I thought of Mia. Who was she really? A shadow looming above my family, wrapped in comfortable familiarity, eclipsing everything I thought I knew. "We need a big son," Eliana explained, her enthusiasm brightening the room even more than our colors. I nodded, trying to assimilate her joy into my heart, but the canvas felt heavier with unexpressed fears. "Absolutely. A giant, sparkly sun," I said, coaxing the corners of my mouth into an encouraging smile, even as I felt the shadows lurking just outside our bubble of innocence. My movements painted a picture of a mother committed to preserving at least a semblance of normalcy, but every brushstroke resonated with unsteady emotions, a riot of confusion, anger, and deep-seated love. Each hue whispered warnings of the inevitable reckoning approaching, like an ominous storm cloud on the horizon, breeding chaos behind the facade of this serene moment. As I worked, snippets of laughter from Eliana chimed sweetly, but the harmony was shattered when my husband's voice rose above the din of our painting. "Mia, we need to talk." The starkness of his tone sent a shiver down my spine, cutting through the protective fog I had desperately woven around us. I paused, brush hovering above the canvas, caught between the urge to listen and the instinct to shield my daughter from the breakdown unfurling in the other room. I could feel Eliana's gaze lift to mine, confusion taking over her innocent face as she sensed my disquiet. But before I could form a rational thought, the living room door cracked open, revealing my husband standing there, the uncertainty painted on his face like an unreadable canvas. "I am sorry, Eliana. I have to talk to your mommy for a minute," he said, his words hanging in the air, heavy and foreboding. You don't have to, I replied, my heart thrashing as I rose to my feet. We're painting. Just like you said we would together. Desperation clawed at my throat, knowing full well that if he did not talk to me now, the inevitable would crash down on us too soon. But he stepped further into the room, casting an uncertain but piercing glance back toward the kitchen, as if delineating the invisible boundary between the two worlds we were caught in. This is about Mia, he admitted, each syllable like a slow needle stitching deeper wounds in the fabric of our existence. About Mia? I echoed, heart pounding. We were teetering on the edge of something insurmountably painful, and I feared any revelation he brought would splinter us all beyond recognition. I think we need to face this together, he said, barely meeting my eyes, his voice laced with the tremors of uncharted territory. My breathing quickened, confusion blurring the lines of anger and terror. He had implied something worse than his infidelity, and I could already see the silhouette of betrayal engulfing my thoughts. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The world shifted underfoot as I stood intertwined in the web of illusion and motivations we had created. And just like that, the door creaked open wider, revealing Clara lingering behind my husband, her expression fraught with gravity. I overheard, she said softly. There's something you both need to see. Eliana stood frozen, eyes darting between our strained faces and Clara's face, paling in intensity. Answers were close, yet they felt as slippery as oil, each moment threatening to slip through my fingers just as our family was adjusting to uncertainties. Anxiety rippled through me as I waited, feeling the room breathe a heavy sigh, as if preparing itself for whatever storm loomed on the horizon. Clara stepped aside, motioning for us to follow her into the kitchen, her demeanor commanding yet genuinely caring, knowing we were on the precipice of something deeply consequential. Had she seen something? Was there more that had unfolded, a dark underbelly stretching beneath the surface of our lives? I stepped forward, drawing in a sharp breath, the reality settling heavily on my shoulders. The day had begun brightly, arms outstretched for a simple moment of joy, of painting and laughter with my child. But now, that hope felt trampled underfoot. Whatever awaited us in that kitchen, I feared it would set the stage for a reckoning none of us could escape. We were tangled in a web of intermingling truths, ready or not. And as I turned to face my husband, heart hammering in realization, I sensed the waves of our fractured family careening toward an unavoidable crash. The revelation that awaited us promised to emerge from shadows darker than any of us could have anticipated, and it threatened to take any remaining threads of understanding with it. The clock was ticking, and I found myself longing for the flood of clarity that might save us all. The kitchen was cloaked in a tense silence, the air constricted as we followed Clara, each step echoing louder than the last. My heart thudded against my ribcage, drowning out the sounds of Eliana's small footsteps behind me, her innocent world slowly teetering on the brink of collapse. In this moment, I felt like a moth drawn to an unyielding flame, as if the answers we were about to uncover could illuminate the dark corners of my life or cause irrevocable damage. Clara led the way to the brightly lit kitchen, but instead of homey warmth, it felt cold and clinical, a hurricane of unexpressed feelings dangling ominously above us. I caught a glimpse of my husband's face, eyes cast down, a muddle of shame and regret tangled together, and I suddenly felt the weight of his disclosure unraveling the very seams of my heart. Mia, Clara began, her voice trembling just enough to remind me of the uncertainty circling like vultures. She's been in town. I found out quite by accident. The words slithered into the space, thick and tangible. It felt as though the ground beneath us shifted slightly, tilting toward an abyss that threatened to swallow us whole. She's been in town? My voice was barely a whisper, raw and trembling. Why didn't you tell me? I deserve to know. I felt the sting of betrayal bite deeper, each pulse resonating with the notion that my world was once again spiraling beyond my control. I didn't want to involve you until I had more information, Clara replied, her eyes glistening with concern. But then I overheard a conversation that made it impossible for me to stay silent. I turned to my husband, searching for some glimmer of understanding, some explanation as to why this terrible truth was clawing its way into our lives like a dark specter. "Why did you meet with her?" I demanded, my voice rising with the gravity of my emotions. "What do you mean, more information?" His gaze found mine, grappling with the weight of my anguish, but instead of clarity, his silence deepened the pit of despair in my belly. It became painstakingly clear. This revelation was only the tip of the iceberg, and beneath the surface lay something deeper, potentially more harmful. "Tell her," Clara urged softly, her eyes darting nervously between us, but my husband remained rigid, trapped in the web of his own making. He cleared his throat, finally meeting my gaze with an unsteady resolve that filled the air with sorrow. "I hadn't planned to see her," he admitted quietly, as if admitting guilt, "but I found her number when I was cleaning out some old things." His voice cracked, but he pressed on. "When I called, no." "You called her?" I could feel my world slipping away, baring fangs and clawing at what little safety I had left. I imagined Mia standing there alive, breathing, a figure from my husband's past who I had managed to contain in the realm of my imagination, now given life through betrayal. "Yes," he said, his shoulders slumping with the moment, the irony of his irresponsible rationale hanging in the air like a neglected painting. "I was trying to understand what happened all those years ago, why it still weighs us down." Something inside me cracked at that moment. Weren't we healing? Weren't we working towards something better? I opened my mouth to unleash the tempest of fury swarming within me, when suddenly Eliana broke through the tension. "Why are you fighting?" she asked, her small voice quivering like a fragile leaf caught in a storm. She clutched her princess pajamas tightly to her chest, eyes wide and filling with confusion, watching her world split apart like an unraveling thread. As I turned to her, I felt a torrent of emotion swell within me, shame at dragging her into this chaotic web, pain at not having the right answers to soothe her worries, and despair at the thought of our happily painted moments shattering before us. "We're not fighting, sweetheart. Just having a conversation," I said, striving for a calm that felt worlds away. "Okay," she replied, but the uncertainty lingered in her tiny frame, weighing heavy despite her effort to appear brave. I refocused, looking back at my husband, the honesty in his eyes, and the remorse etched deeply into his features challenging me further. "You gave her a chance to explain?" I demanded, the betrayal rising like bile. "What could she possibly have to say that would justify this? We have a history, Brielle." "I needed to know how she felt," he admitted, his voice softening as regret poured forth. "But I swear, I don't want anything from her anymore. I want you." "Is that why you're infatuated with the past? To understand what we built amid this chaos?" I pressed. "Or is that not the only thing binding you to her?" In that moment, Clara moved closer, her compassion veiling my husband's trembling form. "Brielle, this isn't just about you two." When I heard them talking, it sounded like there was something Mia needs to reveal. Something serious. I felt my heart sink at the thought, crossing my arms in an effort to shield myself from the impending storm. "What do you mean? What could be so serious that it means hiding it from me?" A suffocating hush enveloped us as Clara's eyes reflected bewilderment, but before she could utter whatever truth lay on her tongue, my husband's grip on the table tightened. "What if she's been hiding things about Eliana?" he whispered, the gravity of his words drawing a circle of silence around us. "What kind of things?" I felt my voice crack, sense of dread now merging with the yearning for clarity and assurance. "It's possible she could be," he hesitated, the air thickening as he swallowed hard. And then, just as the words hung suspended in the air, raucously fragile, as the whispered secrets began to tumble like hidden stones refusing to stay buried, the doorbell rang sharply, slicing through the thick tension. My heart raced at the unexpected interruption, a fleeting moment filled with the hope of reprieve, the surge of adrenaline propelling me back into reality. But as I turned, A chilling sensation washed over me, an inkling that whatever storm was brewing inside could easily be intensified by whatever shadow now loomed just beyond our door. Is anyone expecting someone? Clara asked, her tone laced with concern, and all at once, dread settled heavily in my stomach, a reminder that this story was far from over, and the reckoning of our intertwined lives had merely begun. The doorbell rang again, echoing insistently through the quiet kitchen, a discordant note amid the tension that thrummed like a live wire between us. I glanced at my husband, whose face was a mixture of disbelief and horror, as if he were anticipating the apparition of a ghost specter that would unveil the very horrors we were trying to name. "He'll get it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, a trembling resolve pushing me forward like a moth drawn to light. Each step toward the door felt like walking deeper into the unknown, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum heralding an unwelcome arrival. When I opened the door, I was met with the sight of a tall woman wrapped in a deep navy coat, her features sharp and confident. She exuded an air of authority, an unsettling calm that felt out of place as I blinked against the sudden gust that rattled through the entryway. "Yes?" I managed to mutter, while a storm brewed inside me, a whirlwind of emotions clamoring to break free. "Brielle, right?" Her voice dripped with a familiarity that ignited a flash of dread. "I'm Nancy. I'm Mia's sister." The mention of Mia sent icy tendrils creeping up my spine. In that very moment, I wished I could close the door and shut her out, but instead, I found myself stepping aside, inviting trouble in like an uninvited guest too polite to leave. "Eliana's in there?" she asked, her eyes darting behind me into the kitchen where Clara and my husband now stood, their expressions shifting from shock to alertness. "Why are you here?" I managed, my voice trembling, each syllable weighted with uncertainty. Overt confidence began to flicker in her demeanor as she stepped inside, brushing off an invisible layer of dust from her coat. "I need to talk to you all. It's important." "Important?" The word ricocheted around the small space, meeting the walls with an echo of disbelief. What could you possibly have to say that would even begin to justify this invasion? Despite my anger, there was an unsettling sense of intrigue tinged with dread. Clara exchanged a worried glance with my husband, who, in that moment, seemed to deflate as if the air had been suddenly sucked from his lungs. The kitchen, once a refuge, now morphed into an interrogation room cloaked in uncertainty, our lives trapped under the harsh glare of revelations yet to unfold. "Mia has been looking for a way to reach you," Nancy said bluntly, her gaze pinning me down. "And it's not what you think. She didn't want to disrupt anything." "But didn't want to disrupt anything?" I interrupted, my heart pounding. "She's appending everything. My husband going behind my back. And now you please, hear me out," she urged, lifting her hands as if to calm an impending storm. "What Mia has to say affects all of us. I wouldn't intrude if this wasn't vital." Each word hung in the air, heavy and pregnant with meaning. As Eliana's small voice broke the suffocating tension from behind me, I turned to catch her, holding tightly onto Clara's hand, uncertainty flickering in her innocent eyes. "Mommy?" Eliana asked, a small frown etched across her forehead. "Why does that lady look sad? Is she here to take me away?" Oh, how could I answer a question like that? I knelt beside her, pulling her close. "No, sweetheart. Just a conversation, one that might be difficult." My voice was a mere whisper, coaxing hope, while my own heart buckled under the weight of fear. "Listen," Nancy continued, her tone softening, "Mia's not here to break you apart. She's just scared. She doesn't want to disrupt your family. But there are truths that you deserve to know. About Eliana." The word sliced through the air, leaving a bloody trail of fear in its wake. My husband's expression twisted, panic riding on his features as if we were standing atop a crumbling cliff edge, headed for a plunge into unknown depths. "What about Eliana?" he asked, voice laced with desperation. "What does she have to do with Mia?" Nancy looked between us, weighing her words like fragile glass. There are things Mia never got to say. Things she's held on to, for both Eliana's sake and yours. Stop! I roared, the heat of rage flaring into a conflagration of disbelief and frustration. You don't get to come here and dangle threats about my daughter, and what she might mean to a woman I don't even want in our lives. I get it. You think she's some kind of threat, Nancy said, unyielding. But the fact is, Mia might have answers to questions you haven't yet thought to ask. If you don't listen to what? I shot back. To another sorry excuse of a woman trying to play a role in my life? I have no interest in anything she has to say, and yet, in that moment of heated defiance, a flicker of concern ignited within. If Mia had indeed been seeking us out, it meant more than idle curiosity. The depths of that need twisted a knife in my gut, and suddenly, a part of me yearned to understand, to uncover what haunted the edges of our lives. The rift between us yawned wider, mirrored in the eyes of my husband, who stood paralyzed by uncertainty and fear. A parent's instinct coiled within me, protecting my child from the unknown darkness threatening our sanctuary. With every beat of silence that passed, the precarious balance of love and betrayal shifted like sand in an hourglass, and beneath it all, the chilling realization sank in. Whether by design or chance, the truth about Mia was about to resurface, threatening to swallow us whole or draw us together in ways we could never have anticipated. Please, Nancy implored, her voice tremoring with urgency, you have to hear her. You and Eliana deserve to understand why this matters. It's crucial. Dread clashed with curiosity, my heart a battlefield of emotions as Nancy's words hung heavy in the air. Everything danced on the precipice of revelation, hope blending with despair like watercolor in a storm, as I contemplated the horizon of our fractured lives. But just as I contemplated my next move, a muffled sound interrupted use, an ironic reminder that life continued beyond our tumultuous moment. Eliana's small hands tugged on my sleeve, and she looked up at me, her eyes reflecting all of my fears and hopes. "Mama, I'm scared," she whispered, her voice a reminder of what truly mattered in this chaos, a fragile heart whose innocence tethered me to reason. And as I gathered courage from her trusting gaze, a shiver ran down my spine as a new thought clawed at me in the dark corners of my mind. What hidden truths had yet to be unearthed? What sort of storm would Nancy's presence unleash? And should I choose to embrace this looming confrontation, where might it lead our fragile family next? The air grew thick with an unsettling tension as I stood in the doorway, caught between the unsettling presence of Nancy and the innocent gaze of Eliana. My heart raced, and I finally turned to gather myself, to set an example for my daughter and shield her from this tempest. "Nancy, just tell us what Mia wants. If we're going to do this, let's get it over with," I said, forcing strength into my voice. The weight of the moment pressed down on me, but I held onto Eliana's hand tighter, feeling her small warmth against the cold grip of fear curling around my heart. Nancy nodded, seeming to take a step back, recalibrating herself. "MIA's been struggling," she finally admitted, lowering her voice as if revealing a deeply personal secret. "After everything that happened, she's been haunted by her choices. And Eliana, she believes your daughter might hold the key to some truths about their past." "What truths?" My husband's voice broke through the murky air. He stood beside me, his brow furrowed, caught between support for me and the residual loyalty to Mia that felt like a tether pulling him in two directions. "I can't say much," Nancy said, glancing back at Clara, who remained silently observing, "but there are pieces of their history tied to Eliana. Things Mia never disclosed because she was scared or ashamed. And if she failed to protect her before," I interrupted, my nerves frazzled. "Protect her from what? Speak clearly, or we can't go forward." MIA's sister sighed, a mix of frustration and sorrow in her demeanor. "Mia fears there's something from their family that could impact Eliana's future. Something genetic, something inherited that she can't ignore anymore. She should have told you." The room felt as though it were spinning. I gripped Eliana's shoulder, as if that simple motion could anchor me in the storm brewing around us. I never knew there were shadows lurking in the corners of MIA's life, woven into the very fabric of our own. Is this why she left? I managed to whisper, questions colliding violently in my mind. Is this the reason she cut ties so abruptly? She left because she believed it would be better for everyone involved. Nance's tone hardened. A decision she regrets more than anything. As she spoke, my heart twisted in empathetic knots. I thought back to the vulnerability I'd seen in Mia, the laughter that seemed tinged with something deeper than joy, a longing for connection, a fear of rejection. But a part of me still hesitated. Whatever nightmares she carries, they have nothing to do with us now. Except they do, Nancy replied, her voice rising a fraction. You might not want to believe it, but they are stitched into Eliana's being. And you may risk her future without knowing why. Clara frowned at the mention of my daughter, her discomfort blaring through the silence. Why should we trust you, Nancy? You're only here because she couldn't muster the strength to come herself. I'm here because MIA's at a place where she can't find her way back alone, Nancy replied. And, quite frankly, she needs all of you. If you could only see the toll it's taken. Stop. I felt the roar rise again, raw and painful. MIA's regrets don't shape our present. Whatever shadow she clings to, it's her burden. I'm not inclined to take it on. Yet even as the words left my mouth, doubt crept in. What if our lives were built on the edge of a dark truth? What if whatever Mia feared connected not just to Eliana's past, but to her adventurous spirit, her quirks, and the brilliance that shone through her youth? The room felt unbearably thick with possibilities and invisible threads of despair. Mommy? Eliana's small voice pulled me back. She looked up at me, worry painted in bright strokes across her innocent face. What are we talking about? Is someone hurt? In that moment, everything froze. Her naivety struck a chord deep within me, igniting a flicker of hope even in the deepening darkness. No, darling, it's just confusing. All of this is confusing. I crouched to meet her gaze, forcing a smile, despite the tempest within my chest. But we're safe, I promise. I love you, and I love you, she responded. And the purity of it felt like a soft balm in the tumult. As I stood again, refreshing clarity surged through me. If Mia believes she has something to say, then she should come herself. If there's a truth to be revealed, we face it boldly together. We don't hide behind cryptic messages. I was surprised to hear the strength in my voice rising again, the remnants of fear morphing into resolve. Nance's expression softened, yet urgency lingered in her eyes. You might want to reconsider. MIA's burden is bigger than you realize. And what she reveals might shatter the candles of light you've lit in your life. The room shifted, the shadows stretching longer. Just as I was about to respond, a sudden crash interrupted USA's sound, unmistakably coming from the kitchen. I turned sharply only to find Clara clutching the edge of the table, her face ashen. I think we should check. But before anyone could move, a loud thud resonated, followed by the sound of glass shattering. My heart dropped. Dread filled my lungs like a heavy fog. Mama! Eliana cried, fear flooding her wide eyes. With swift instincts kicking in, I dashed to the kitchen, followed closely by my husband and Nancy, but with each hurried step, a chilling realization took hold of me. Whatever had been broken, whatever had shattered, belied the fragile facade we had created. And in that moment, like glass splintering across the floor, a lingering thought clawed at the edges of my consciousness. Wasn't it time we truly faced the shards of our past? As I stepped into the kitchen, my heart echoed with a premonition. The fragile threads of our lives intertwined with darkness were unraveling, revealing deeper secrets waiting to be pulled taut into the light, or left to drown beneath the surface. What would we find next? Undeniable truths or ominous reminders of the past? And more importantly, would it pull us apart or bind us tighter together in ways we never envisioned? The uncertainty loomed as I prepared to confront whatever lay in wait. I stood on the precipice of a moment that felt monumental, trapped between fears and yearning for clarity, an avalanche of emotions poised to cascade down at any second. The chaos that had enveloped us wasn't just an intrusion. It was a reckoning of force that could tear us apart or glue our shattered pieces back together. As I pushed through the kitchen door, I was met with a sight that shattered the stillness. Nancy frozen mid-movement, Clara staring blankly at her phone with a face drained of color, and my husband staring, mouth agape, as shards of glass crunched underfoot. The source of the crash lay revealed on the tiled floor. The remnants of a picture frame, the smiling faces within bowed under the weight of our unraveling reality. Among the debris, the image of our family captured in a moment of pure joy was now distorted, shattered as starkly as our lives. I could feel the weight of unfulfilled promises colliding with fragments of hope, striking like lightning against the darkened backdrop of our existence. "He'll clean it up," my husband muttered, his voice faltering as if he could divert the incoming storm with mundane action. But silence lingered like a thick fog, the air charged, electric, ripe with anticipation, a moment of truth hanging dramatically between us. Is that all you can do? I explained, anger and desperation twisting together like a tempest within my gut. Pick up the pieces instead of facing what truly matters. His gaze met mine, a silent plea unwavering as we teetered at the edge of our own history, the gravity of the moment pressing down. "I'm sorry, Brielle. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I thought I could manage," he stammered, his voice wavering, like a candle flickering in a gale. "Manage?" I echoed, incredulity rising despite my better judgment. "You've encrypted your truths behind hidden walls and called it management. But this," I gestured at the broken glass, "is what your decisions have wrought." Eliana's small frame took a step back, her innocent eyes wide and filled with confusion, further slicing through the tension with unmatched tenderness. "Mommy?" she asked, voice quavering, bouncing me back from the abyss of anger that threatened my control. "I'm okay, sweetheart," I whispered, though my heart plummeted further into chaos, my voice barely recognizable as it fought through the storm. "But it's time we fix the things that are wrong. It's time to be brave." A flicker of uncertainty crossed my husband's face, and I remembered the power that accompanied the confrontation of truth, the heat of discontent morphing into clarity with each passing second. "Brielle," he opened his mouth, but I cut him off, the wellspring of strength and sorrow mingling in an explosive mixture surging up my spine. "I am tired of hiding from our truths. If Emma is not here to confront us herself, then we will have to face the shadows she cast upon our lives without her." There was a ripple of unease among us, a miasma of quiet realization settling over the kitchen. Nancy straightened, a glimmer of determination in her gaze as she nodded, an unexpected ally in this surging tide. "You're right, Brielle. Despite everything, Mia needs to hear her part in this. We all do. She is struggling, but she can't run from this any longer," she said, a quiet authority entwined with empathy. Though a part of me bristled at the thought of Mia burdening us yet again, a deeper urge within commanded attention, the need for clarity to push toward closure that promised to bind the severed connections we had already taken for granted. "Then let her know," I said, resolve building with every syllable. "Bring her here, or welcome to her. We're not going to continue in this cycle of running. As my words echoed through the room, Clara stepped forward, true friendship illuminating her gazia, backing devoid of judgment. "We can't let fear dictate our actions when there are children involved," she urged. "We owe it to Eliana, to our Sylvesto, stop the cycle of secrets and omissions." "I will do what I must," Nancy replied, her sincerity radiating an unexpected warmth. "If Mia cannot find her footing, it'll help her find her way back home." A swell of hope tingled in the recesses of my heart, an assurance that perhaps this chaotic meeting could unravel burdens and connect us further, mending the threads that had worn thin through scars of pain. Together, we crafted a plan, one not just to confront the past, but to build a bridge toward a future, however fractured. I could feel the heartbeat of potential renewal pulsing through the space, lingering like a soft melody sung through the strings of our hearts. The storm was raging still, but perhaps it wouldn't wash us away. Perhaps, through the silence, the chaos, the confrontation, we could emerge stronger. Hours later, as we gathered in the living room awaiting Nance's return, Eliana and Clara sat at the edge of the room working on their art, a calming backdrop to the anxiety swirling around us. "Mommy," I finished. Eliana beamed, holding up a beautifully chaotic painting of colorful splotches. "Wow! That's incredible, sweetheart," I explained, kneeling down to admire her colorful creation, momentarily chasing away the worries that floated like clouds above my head. "And I made a sparkly sun," she added with a giggle, her laughter evoking rays of warmth as it washed over the room. In that fleeting moment, amidst the kaleidoscope of colors that gave birth to joy, I felt a flicker of hope return, a reminder that love built forts against the fiercest of storms. "She is so resilient," I whispered to Clara, who smiled softly, capturing the essence of this precious moment in her heart. Then, just as the anticipation began to settle like a shroud, the door swung open. I turned to see Nancy stepping across the threshold, her expression firm yet soft, a mixture of resolve and vulnerability dancing in her eyes. "Mia shall be joining us shortly," she announced, and at that moment, I felt the world shift, yet again a huge rock being rolled that would soon reveal the realities lying buried beneath our intertwined past. As we settled into this waiting period, I looked around the room at my family, Eliana, whose innocence glowed like an unyielding flame, Clara, steadfast as she prepared to support through whatever storm threatened to unfold, and my husband, his uncertain gaze roving between hope and regret. And as I took a deep, steadying breath, I understood the incredible weight of what was on the horizon, the truth that had lurked in the shadows, aching to be spoken. In those waiting moments, I felt ready, determined to embrace the darkness, knowing our family was on the brink of transformation. Every moment drew us closer, forging new pathways where once there were only walls, preparing us for the encounters that would reshape our perceptions entirely. All we needed was the courage to embrace reality together, come what may, because in the end, the clarity that emerged from chaos was a tapestry richer than any singular moment, and through it, we would discover what it truly meant to be a family. And as the door creaked open one last time, I knew with certainty that it would be the moment everything began to change. "Let's unravel this together," I whispered softly to myself, bracing for whatever truth would unfold next, a passage toward healing just a breath away.